How do you stop these guys? What goes into it every single week? And obviously the Buccaneers had a tough time doing that against Aiden Hutchinson. We're kind of talking about it because of that. But the way that you brought it up to me, and I love it, is like, hey, let's talk about how you stop these guys. Because Parsons himself, he's got multiple, like 2-sack games throughout his entire career. And so I'll kind of just open it up to you. And I watched a bunch of these guys and their film that we have so far in 2024. So I've got some thoughts as well. But just what'd you think about like a performance like Hutchinson's and ones that we have seen in the past where defensive lines clearly emphasize their star and then offenses sort of have to just figure out how to slow these guys down?
Yeah, well, it's really difficult. It's virtually impossible when you get the really great ones. I think the Parsons one was particularly interesting. I thought Clint Kubiak did an unbelievable job of slowing down Micah Parsons. And it kind of goes to this point of if you don't have a true stud tackle or a true stud interior player, if you're playing against a great interior defensive lineman, what can you do stylistically, systematically to try and like help everyone out? And it's about the whole ecosystem, right? It's about, can we run the ball? What can we do with our helps and our checks? Does the quarterback get the ball out on time? I've always thought that sacks, there's this debate. Is it a quarterback stat? Is it a line stat? It's a team stat. It's everyone involved. If we run the ball well, it helps us out. If the receivers get open quickly, it helps us out. The Saints in particular, a fascinating game plan to slow down Micah Parsons, where they kind of brought a wave of blockers. So instead of just having like a straight double team or just chipping on the end, as most teams try and do with these top guys, right? You put a tight end in the wing, you say, crack this guy for us, then release, buy us an extra beat if you can, and stop the juice off the ball. What the Saints did, they were running the ball so well, they were hitting play action shots so well, they were bringing guys across the formation to take Micah Parsons on. They were leaking the back out to take Micah Parsons on, but they did it in a wave. So he has to beat the initial blocker, and then he gets through that one. He's like, great job done. And then here comes another guy out of nowhere, does clean him in the ear, and he's got to go figure that out too. So it was a really, really interesting plan. Actually, it reminds me a lot of how teams have started to attack Pat Mahomes and Lamar Jackson in the pressure game, which is bringing like a layered pass rush, because they know, well, if we send all 4 guys at once, they're probably going to beat someone. These guys are too good. And then we're just exposed. So teams have started to layer the rush where you get one guy go through, then a second wave comes. So once the guy beats someone in the backfield, here comes a new unblocked defender to try and clean things up. And what was most noticeable about Parsons for me, when you dig through some of the data, one, the Saints really ran very few straight dropbacks. And if they did, they had 2 guys, but 2 guys coming from different angles. And then as you go even more granularly, Parsons' get-off rate was really, really low. He was slow off the ball. And I think personally, because they were running the ball so well, the play action was so good, there was guys coming from all different angles he wasn't expecting, that he's just hesitating. They got one of the best downhill threats in the league, the most terrifying downhill pass rushers, to start patting his feet, wondering where the blockers were coming from. And I don't know what more you can do than freeze a great pass rusher.
It's a really good call out by you, especially that last part where, again, we've talked about what ways can you sort of stop that explosive first step. Because bringing it into a little bit of a scouting perspective, me as somebody who loves the NFL draft, when I'm watching edge rushers, one of the first things that I will look for and I will note is, what's the first step like? Can you get off the ball? Because if you can in a very impactful way, it puts so much stress on even the best offensive tackles to hit their landmarks in their drops and get to a certain spot where they feel comfortable protecting their outside shoulder without overextending to give up the inside shoulder. And it's like you said, it's so difficult to stop the guys who are really good at it, but it starts with that first step. And if you can do anything to give those edge rushers a little hesitation and take a little juice off of that first step, sometimes that wins the battle in and of itself. You mentioned that we see tight ends sometimes kind of detached from the line of scrimmage in that wingback format as a way to really slow these guys down. And for the Saints in particular, this is just another opportunity to kind of give a hat tip to what a great job their offensive coordinator, Clint Kubiak, is doing this season, because a talking point that we had going into the year was the Saints were pretty good at play action last year. They weren't terrible, but they were pretty good. They just didn't run it a lot. It just were a team that I think they were either second to last or last in the NFL in total play action attempts last year. Kubiak, with the 49ers as their pass game coordinator, they didn't run it, most in the NFL last year, but they were number 1 in passing grade off of play action. So it was very clear that they understood philosophically what play action did for them in their offense. And they called it at advantageous times. Brock Purdy last year was very comfortable in how Clint Kubiak and Kyle Shanahan were calling play action in that system. And Derek Carr and the Saints, it feels like, are very comfortable in doing that as well. And I think that is something that is worth noting, because I think that people think about PFF and we just think that you should never run the ball, that the running back position should never exist. It's pointless. There's better EPA per play. When you pass the football, just pass it all the time. And the coaches will kind of come back to us, and people who are more, in the game and on the sidelines would be like, no, you don't understand the secondary and ancillary points of running the football, what that does to you. And I do believe there is an unquantifiable mental aspect of running the football that goes into something that is like this. You need to create that little bit of hesitation with some of these incredible edge rushers, and you do that by either running the ball straight up and being good at it, or play action, at least making them think you might be running the ball. Because if Micah Parsons is getting off the snap at even 70, 80%, it's just not 100, that could mean all the difference in the world. So I'm glad that you brought that up with the Saints specifically about that, how they did that there, because I think the incorporation of play action and the mental warfare that it gives these defenses is a very important part of why the Saints are having so much success.
Yeah, it was the 5th slowest get-off of his career. And he's had games where he's not been fully healthy. And he looked really healthy when he had a free get-off. He looked absolutely fine. He still had 3 pressures, and they were all beat guy out the cleat pressures, right? There was one where it was more of a second effort, but for the most part, it was get off the ball and beat someone. If you can put that in someone's head, you're right. The way we kind of do the analysis when it's like how impactful is the run game is kind of go play by play. And what you lose is like the concertinaing effect of standing in the huddle and nothing being more demoralizing than we physically can't stop these guys. Yes. If they just want to plow it. I mean, the Cowboys won. It was just a disastrous defensive performance in terms of fit, talent, everything up front. They had 8 guys in the box constantly, and they were getting blown off the ball. What could be a worse feeling than coming to the sideline and being like, we could not physically put more guys in the middle of the field and we can't stop anyone. What do we do? And then when they boot out of it or they take a shot of it, they are just gashing us everywhere. 70 yards over our head, Shaheed is in the end zone dancing. It's like, there's no worse feeling. And if you can do that and limit a top tier pass rusher now, it sounds all good and grand to say, right? Of like, well, let's just run the ball in the old school ways. We run at them, right? Drain the legs of the pass rusher by running at him. Guys like Parsons or Hutchinson are so good against the run. It isn't a helpful thing to just run directly at them. But if you can marry that with what you're doing in the play action game and put the doubt in of what is coming and just the physical toll of a guy crunching you from the side that you didn't see coming, that's really impactful. And then the Saints just need credit because the tenacity, the technique, the discipline of their players was unbelievable. It's easy to just say the plan was great and it was good, and Kubiak's done great and he has, but Alvin Kamara sticking his nose in on Micah Parsons, he had one-on-one assignments. Usually we'd all clip that and go, what are they doing? Why are you leaving it back on Micah Parsons? It was part of the plan. He was perfect technically. He brought it one-on-one. You just can't ask for more from players.
Man, yeah, we're only 2 weeks in, but the Saints, with Kubiak as their offense coordinator, look like the version of the Saints that felt like we were supposed to get a lot more last year, right? When they were predicted to win the division. And they've made some additions. Obviously, Talise Fuanga being able to take one of those offensive tackle spots is big for them. But, you would have had Ryan Ramczyk. So it's like, hey, it's sort of that even existed last year. And so some changes along the interior offensive line, some guys playing really good. But I think that's a really good call out by you there.